Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're gonna be diving deep on video editing services, specifically a company called BrandMyTube. They're making some pretty bold claims about saving creators like you, a ton of time.
Oh, yeah.
And so we dug through their website and a promo video they put on YouTube to try to get like the real scoop for you. So the big question is, can outsourcing your video editing actually unlock more time and better content?
The tempting idea, right? Especially if you're juggling a million things as a creator.
Totally. So let's start with the basics. What exactly does BrandMyTube offer? Their website talks a lot about unlimited video editing.
Right. And they operate on like a flat monthly fee subscription model, kind of like what we see with Spotify or Netflix. But for your video editing needs. So this could be a good fit for creators who have a steady stream of content they need edited.
Okay, that makes sense. And here's something that really jumped out at me. They edit all kinds of videos, not just the typical YouTube stuff. We're talking real estate videos, commercials, even explainer videos. Is that something you see a lot of in the video editing world?
That's definitely a wider range than some services that specialize in like specific niches. It suggests they have a pretty diverse team of editors with a broad skill set.
Which could be a good thing if you're working on a variety of projects.
Yeah. Speaking of variety, how does the whole process work with BrandMyTube? Their website mentions this 3-step system.
Yeah, they keep it pretty simple. Upload your raw footage, fill out a request form, outlining what you want, and then, get this, download the finished video within 24 hours.
Hold on, 24 hours? That seems incredibly fast. Is that even possible without sacrificing quality?
It's definitely one of their key selling points. They emphasize this. Dedicated editor model, which means you get paired with the same editor for your entire subscription. This supposedly helps them understand your style and preferences so they can work more efficiently. That's interesting. I wonder if that consistency really translates into a faster turnaround time. They also seem to be big on encouraging you to upload multiple videos at once and create a queue. Almost like building a video editing pipeline.
It's an interesting approach. If you're someone who plans and shoots their content in batches, this could be a major time saver. But if you're more of a fly-by-the-seat-of-your-pants creator, it might not be as beneficial.
True. Okay, let's talk about some of the nitty-gritty details. Their website has a pretty extensive FAQ section. They cover things like turnaround time, which we just touched on, file types, resolution, even how many revisions you can request. But one detail I found intriguing was their stance on what they don't do. They're upfront about not offering voiceovers or complex animations from scratch.
Right, and that's an important distinction. By focusing on like core editing services, they're able to streamline their process and likely maintain that impressive 24-hour turnaround time. But it does mean you'll need to find other solutions for those additional services if you need them.
It's almost like they're saying, we're the experts in editing, but we're not trying to be a one-stop shop for all your video needs. So you have to weigh the convenience of their core services
against the potential hassle of managing multiple providers.
Exactly. It all comes down to your specific needs and priorities as a creator.
Okay, so we've talked about what they offer and how it works. Now let's get into the social proof. They're not shy about showcasing testimonials from some pretty big names, like Brian Scott, a YouTuber with over 667,000 subscribers. He credits BrandMyTube with helping him achieve success.
Testimonials can definitely be powerful, but it's always wise to look at them with a critical eye. It's smart to ask yourself, are these just cherry-picked positive reviews? Or do they represent a broader trend of satisfied customers? Right, we have to think critically. What's interesting is they highlight how Brian went from uploading once a month to 3 times a week after he started using BrandMyTube. That suggests the service might have freed up a significant amount of his time, which he could then reinvest in creating more content. That's a pretty concrete example of their value proposition in action, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It directly addresses that desire for more time that so many creators crave.
Speaking of diverse creators, they also feature Sunny Sharma from Personal Mastery Quest, who specifically mentions that he didn't have the skills or a team to handle video editing in-house. So BrandMyTube filled that gap for him.
That's a really common scenario. A lot of creators are brilliant at what they do, whether it's teaching, entertaining, or sharing their expertise, but they might not have the technical skills or resources to handle high-quality video editing.
Right. That's where a service like this could potentially be a game changer. They also mentioned Savita from Reiki Shakti, who has over 14,000 subscribers, and Naz Shah of Heart of Inner Joy from the UK.
It looks like they have a pretty diverse client base in terms of content niches and geographic locations. That suggests their service could be adaptable to a wide range of needs.
And they highlight Terry Huberman, who apparently gained over 4,000 subscribers in just 4 months after partnering with Brand MyTube. That's pretty impressive growth, though it's hard to say how much of that can be directly attributed to the editing service itself.
Right. There are always multiple factors at play when it comes to audience growth. But it's certainly an encouraging statistic.
It makes you wonder what kind of results you could achieve if you had more time to focus on the creative side of your content instead of getting bogged down in the editing process.
It's a compelling thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's talk about the elephant in the room, pricing. Brand MyTube offers 3 different tiers, starting, Pro, and Ultimate. And as you might expect, the cost per video goes down. As you move up to the higher volume plans,
Okay, so they're catering to different levels of output. But there's one detail that really caught my eye. They advertise unlimited revisions. What do you make of that? Is it truly unlimited? Or are there probably some hidden caveats?
unlimited is a powerful marketing word, that's for sure. In reality, there are probably some reasonable limits in place. To prevent abuse of the system, you'd have to dig into their terms of service for the fine print. But in general, offering multiple rounds of revisions demonstrates a commitment to client satisfaction.
That's true. But it also makes me wonder about the editing process itself. How much creative control do you retain when you're working with a service like this?
That's a great question. And it leads us into some of the potential downsides or things to watch out for when considering a service, like Brand MyTube.
Okay, let's pause there for a moment and come back to unpack those potential downsides after a quick break. All right, we're back and aptnesses. Before the break, we were getting into some of the potential downsides of using a service like Brand MyTube. One thing that comes to mind is creative control. If you're handing off your editing to someone else, how much say do you really have in the final product?
Yeah, that's a valid concern. While having a dedicated editor can be great for consistency, it also means you're relying on their interpretation of your vision. And remember, they work with a ton of different creators, so there's always the risk that your unique style could get lost in the shuffle.
It's like that old saying, a camel is a horse designed by committee. You don't want your videos to end up feeling
Generic or cookie cutter, right?
Exactly. And it's not just about the overall aesthetic. We talked earlier about how Brand MyTube doesn't handle things like voiceovers or complex animation. So if you need those elements, you'll end up having to manage multiple providers, which could add complexity to your workflow. Yeah, it's almost like you're trading one set of challenges for another. Instead of wrestling with the technical aspects of editing, you're now coordinating with multiple vendors and making sure everything fits together seamlessly.
Right. And then there's the issue of turnaround time. While 24 hours is impressive for standard edits, what happens if you need a rush job or have a tight deadline that falls outside their usual window? Do they have the flexibility to accommodate those situations?
That's a great point. The world of content creation can be pretty fast-paced and unpredictable. You need a partner who can keep up with your demands.
Another thing to consider is scalability. Their pricing tiers suggest they can handle different levels of output. But what happens if your needs change significantly? Let's say your channel explodes in popularity and you suddenly need to double or triple your video production. Can Brand MyTube scale with you?
Or what if you decide to pivot your content strategy and start creating a different type of video that requires a different editing style? Can your dedicated editor adapt to those changes? Or will you be stuck in a creative rut?
Those are all important questions to ask up front. It's like any relationship. Communication is key. You need to make sure you're on the same page with your editor and that they understand your vision and your goals.
Speaking of relationships, let's not forget the human element. Brand MyTube talks a lot about their dedicated editor model. But what happens if you just don't click with the editor you're assigned to?
That's always a possibility. Personality clashes and communication breakdowns can happen in any collaborative environment. It would be interesting to know if Brand MyTube has a process for addressing those situations. Can you request a different editor if things aren't working out?
It would be helpful to know that going in. And while we're talking about things they don't explicitly mention, let's touch on file formats and software compatibility. They mention using Adobe Premiere Pro on their website, which is industry standard, but do they have any limitations on the types of files you can upload?
That's a crucial technical detail that a lot of creators overlook. You don't want to get stuck in a situation where you can't edit your footage because it's in the wrong format or uses a codec that their system doesn't support.
Yeah, it's always better to be safe than sorry. So let's say you've weighed all the pros and cons and you're intrigued by what brand MyTube has to offer, what are some steps you can take to learn more and make an informed decision?
Well, their website is a good starting point, of course. They have detailed information about their services, pricing, and FAQs. But I'd also recommend going beyond the marketing materials and doing some independent research.
What kind of research are we talking about?
Well, you can start by looking at reviews from other creators who have used brand MyTube. There are plenty of independent review sites and YouTube channels that offer unbiased opinions.
That's a great idea. It's always helpful to hear from people who have actually used the service and can share their firsthand experiences, both good and bad.
You could also look at competitor services. There are a lot of video editing companies out there, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. Comparing brand MyTube to its rivals will give you a better sense of where it fits in the market and whether it offers the best value for your specific needs.
That's a smart approach. Don't just settle for the first option you come across. Do your due diligence and shop around to find the best fit for you.
Exactly. And remember, it's not just about finding a good editor. It's about finding a partner who understands your vision and can help you achieve your creative goals.
Well said. Before we move on to our final thoughts, there was one more interesting detail on the brand MyTube website that I wanted to touch on. They emphasize that their editors are all native English speakers. What are your thoughts on that?
That's an interesting point. I think it speaks to their commitment to quality and attention to detail if you're creating content. For an English-speaking audience, it makes sense to work with editors who have a native understanding of the language and can ensure that your videos are polished and professional.
Yeah. It's those subtle nuances that can really make a difference. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. From the nitty-gritty details of how brand MyTube works to the broader implications of outsourcing your video editing. Let's take a moment to gather our thoughts and then come back to wrap up this deep dive with some final takeaways for you. Okay, we're back. Ready to wrap up our deep dive into brand MyTube and the world of video editing services. I don't know about you, but my head is buzzing with all this information we uncovered.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating exploration, hasn't it? We've gone from like the nuts and bolts of their service, the 24-hour turnaround, dedicated editors, the unlimited revisions, to the bigger picture of what it means to outsource, a crucial part of your content creation process.
Yeah, we've talked about the potential benefits like saving time, improving consistency, and freeing up your mental bandwidth to focus on other aspects of your business.
And we've also explored some of the potential downsides, things like creative control, limitations on certain services, and the importance of finding an editor who truly understands your vision.
Yeah, it's a lot to consider, but ultimately the decision of whether or not to use a service like brand MyTube comes down to your individual needs and priorities as a creator.
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all answer. What works brilliantly for one creator might be a total disaster for another. It's all about finding the right fit.
So let's bring it back to you, our listener. If you're on the fence about outsourcing your video editing, what are some key questions you should ask yourself before making a decision?
Well, first and foremost, how much time are you currently spending on video editing? And how much is that time worth to you? Could you be using that time more effectively to grow your business, create new content, or simply recharge and avoid burnout?
That's a crucial question. Time is our most valuable resource, especially as creators.
Absolutely. Another question to consider is your budget. Can you comfortably afford the monthly subscription fee for a service like brand MyTube? Or would that money be better spent elsewhere in your business?
And don't forget about the value you're getting for your money. Does brand MyTube offer features or services that justify the cost? Or are there more affordable options that might meet your needs?
Here's another one. How important is creative control to you? Are you comfortable handing off the reins to an editor and trusting their judgment? Or do you prefer to have a more hands-on approach to the editing process?
Yeah, if you're a control freak like me, that might be a deal breaker.
And finally, think about your long-term goals as a creator. Will outsourcing your editing help you achieve those goals faster? Or will it create more headaches than it solves?
I love that question. It's all about aligning your choices with your vision for the future. Well, I think we've given our listeners plenty to chew on today. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
Just this. The world of video editing. It's constantly evolving, with new tools and technologies emerging all the time. Whether you choose to go the DIY route, hire a freelancer, or partner with a service like brand MyTube, the most important thing is to stay curious, keep learning, and never stop experimenting.
Couldn't have said it better myself. A huge thank you to you. for joining us on this deep dive into the world of video editing services. We hope you gain some valuable insights and feel empowered to make the best decision for your unique needs. Until next time, keep creating.